Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for our webinar. My name is Katy Hogan. I'm a Director of Workforce Programs here at the Partnership for Public Service, and I'm really excited to be with you all this evening for the conversation. In case you are unfamiliar with the Partnership for Public Service, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit working to build a better government and a stronger democracy. How do we do that? Through policy ideas to make government work better, through leadership development programs, through workforce programming, which is where I sit in the organization, and convening conversations and events like this to help support our federal workforce. We are here to support you as best we can through resource sharing, providing plain language explainers, and continuing to do what is a hallmark of the Partnership for Public Service, which is sharing the incredible work that federal employees do for our country. And on that note, I just want to say my most sincere thank you to you. It is really important that we share, and I think I speak for everyone at the Partnership for Public Service, that we are so grateful for your service to our country. So thank you. With that, before we turn things over to our panelists, I'd like to make a couple of housekeeping notes to keep us all organized before we dig into today's content on what employers and recruiters are looking for and tips to approach your job search. So before we kick things off, a disclaimer. The content provided during this session is for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide any legal advice or guidance. If you require legal advice, we recommend consulting with a qualified attorney who can assess your unique circumstances. Throughout the webinar, we will answer your questions that you submitted while registering. You may also submit a question anonymously through the Q&A function, and we will work to get through some of those this evening as well. We are not going to be able to answer every question today, unfortunately, and we will have a series of other explainers over the next couple of weeks to dig into additional topics. So we invite you to explore those and attend those, and we may not get to a certain topic or question, but be on the lookout to see if they're reflected in a future webinar in coming weeks. Also, we will post all these explainer series conversations on our resource hub for federal employees, so you can access this recording after this evening. And finally, while this discussion is geared for federal employees, of course, it is an open forum and we may have folks joining us from other communities. So welcome. Before we go on, I would like to introduce our guests who are joining us tonight to help answer your questions. So Martha and Larry, could you please introduce yourselves? And Martha, you can start and then we'll go to Larry.
Hello, everybody. My name is Martha LeMondes. As Katy mentioned, I actually am physically located in Syracuse, New York, but I lived in the Washington, D.C. area for 25 years. I am a military spouse. I have been through 7 career transitions, so I'm here to tell you that you can survive a career transition. 2 of them were involuntary, and 5 of them were primarily due to the fact that my husband was in the military and I was a following spouse, so I was up and moving numerous times. So one of the involuntary career transitions that I did was at a small company called AOL, where I worked for 12 years. And I'm sure many of you may still even have an AOL email address. I know I do. I don't use it very often, and I don't recommend putting it on your resume. We'll go into that momentarily. But they asked for 3,000 people to raise their hand to leave the organization with a severance package. And I rose my hand. My husband was being moved to Aberdeen Proving Grounds north of Baltimore for his final command. And I said, you know what, this is as good a time as any for me to leave this organization so I don't have to continue to lay people off. So that was one of my involuntary, or that was a voluntary, but it felt involuntary. So I'm here again to tell you that you can survive this. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the things that I've learned over the last 20 years in my career transitions. I work for Stanton Chase, which is an organization based in Washington, D.C. We're a global company, but I do executive search for governments, nonprofits, for-profits, aerospace, defense, you name it, I do it. I'm primarily focused on government, aerospace, and defense, but I've also done quite a bit of nonprofit in the area. So thank you for having me, Katy.
Awesome, thank you. Larry?
Thank you, Katy. My name is Larry Slesinger. I'm an executive search consultant. I'm in Montgomery County, Maryland. My specialty is helping nonprofit organizations in the Washington, D.C. area find talented people for senior level management positions. I'll tell you a little bit more about my firm and my work when I make my initial comments in a few minutes.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. So today, participants are hoping to leave this webinar with an understanding of what recruiters are looking for and how to strategically approach their job search. So to get us started, can you start by sharing a little bit more about what employers are looking for right now? And perhaps you can also share with candidates how federal experience is viewed by potential employers. And whoever would like to start.
Sure, I can start, and then Larry, you can add whatever I may not share with the group. So I would say that people are looking for doers. Honestly, I do executive search, but even at the executive search level, the organizations that I'm speaking to want people that can do the work as well as manage and lead the work. So I think it's super important when you are transitioning to any role, whether you're going from government to industry, or I went from teaching to training and development, is to really make sure that you can speak to what you have accomplished, what you've led, what you've been able to execute, and the impact that you've had on the organization. So that, I would say, that doesn't seem like some rocket science or anything like that, but I think it's important to know that that's what I'm seeing the job market looking for, is people that can do things and can move things forward. Larry, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or if you're seeing anything different.
Yes, well, I wouldn't say that I see things different, but I think the thing to keep in mind is that every job opening is different from all the other ones. Each employer has its own particular needs at the moment, and they're looking for somebody who they think can do the job. So they're looking for a certain amount of skills, experience, expertise, interpersonal skills that match what they think they need. And one implication of that is that if you apply for 25 jobs and you get ignored or turned down by 24, it doesn't mean the 25th is going to be just like the first 24. It could be exactly, you could be for the 25th opening what they want. And so one of the lessons of a good job search, or one of the things to keep in mind, is that you need to be patient and you need to be persistent.
Thank you for that, Larry. So to go a little bit further on that job hunt piece, how should folks be thinking about their job hunt, especially in what some consider to be a tight job market?
Good. Well, let me take a few minutes. And actually, when you were asking us to do the self-introductions, I thought that was just to be a quick who we are. But I did have a few comments that I want to make about a job search in general. So maybe I can take a couple of minutes right now, Katie, for that.
Please, whatever you think. We'd love to hear more about you, Larry, and then we can come back to the job search piece.
Well, I want to weave into that. So my first job was as a federal worker. It was with an organization that some of you might have read about in the last few weeks, the Inter-American Foundation, one of the tiniest agencies in the federal government. It's an independent organization with appropriations directly from Congress that works in social and economic development in Latin America. Within a year of my joining that staff, it was my first job out of school, we were in the bullseye of the Heritage Foundation. And they engineered a takeover of the board and of the organization. They wanted to change our orientation. The goal wasn't to break the organization or close us, but they wanted to seize it and reorient it. And so there was a long political battle. So what's been going on now with the Inter-American Foundation and USAID and the African Development Foundation and many other agencies is way worse than what I experienced a few decades ago. But we survived that then, and you will survive this now, even though you don't know what's next. What I do now, as I mentioned, I'm an executive search consultant, also known as a headhunter. I prefer the term matchmaker. Headhunter has a little bit too much aggression, violence to it. I don't work with anybody who doesn't want to be part of a job search, so my goal is to find a match. I'm hired and paid by the employer. So the implication is that one, I'm not a career coach. I don't take on people to help them find a job. Nobody looking for a job pays me for that assistance. So I'm like a real estate agent representing a seller in the house. I do want to be an honest broker between the two, but the employer is who's hiring me. I'm very eager to hear your questions in a few minutes, but I wanted to identify a few things that I think are important to keep in mind. You have a tremendous, if you have been fired recently by the federal government, you have a tremendous advantage compared to many people in a job search, because you don't have to do it furtively, secretly. You don't have to squeeze in a few minutes at lunchtime. You now can and should tell everybody you know that you are ready for something new. And a lot of people, in most times, in most eras, in times of normalcy, you just don't have that, quote, luxury. So take advantage of that, that you have the time and you can be open. And when you tell people that you're looking, everybody will understand why, and they will want to help you. A couple things on resumes and references and networking, and then we can return to it when we get to the questions. Make sure now, to prepare for a job search, make sure your resume is up to date and accurate. Stress accomplishments. What did you achieve that others didn't or can't? If you say something in your resume that is what the person before you could say and the person after you could say, it's not a good phrase, because you're just lifting from the job announcement. Don't say that you are responsible for marketing. Say that you increased sales by 25%, which is the highest in 5 years. So focus on accomplishments. The resume, in my mind, can be 2 or 3 pages. I've never subscribed to the school that a resume needs to be 1 page. Resumes now are all read online, so nobody's printing it. It's not on paper. If you've worked in the federal government, make sure you remove all the jargon, the abbreviations that you in an agency know. If it says FSO, don't say FSO, because most people don't know that means Foreign Service Officer. You might be surprised how many people don't know that DOJ means Department of Justice. So get rid of those abbreviations as the lead. You can have them afterwards, but look for that jargon and get rid of it. Line up your references now. Have the references ready so that if you go through a couple rounds of interviews and an employer is interested in talking to your references, you can within an hour send them names of a few people they can contact. Don't take the next 2 or 3 days trying to call people and get their permission and get their current contact information. That is valuable time that you don't want to lose. For the contact information, get your references personal mobile number and personal email address. Don't use their government email address, government phone, because you don't know if they're going to be in that job 6 weeks or 2 months from now. So get the numbers that will be constant. Last thing is to think about networking. Networking is going to be by far the most important thing you do to get your next job. To get your networking task underway, start by making a list of 15 people who you know, who you think might be helpful in helping you find openings. The next thing is networking. Did I just say networking? It bears repeating. If you think you're shy, if you're an introvert, if you think you might be bothering somebody because you're asking them to help you find a job, you need to change your attitude about that. People truly like to help friends and colleagues find their next opportunity. We've all been in this situation. The people you're going to talk to, they've been in a job search before. They're going to be in a job search in the future. One of the first jobs that I got in my career, the key to that was when I told a colleague of mine for the 3rd time over several months that I was still looking. He said, "Oh, just yesterday I helped create a new organization. Let me pass your name to the new executive director." Why didn't he think about that 2 days before? Because I had contacted him 2 times earlier in the previous months. Well, that's obvious. I'm not important to him. He doesn't wake up every day thinking about what he can do to help me. But when I contacted him for the 3rd time over a few months, he immediately was glad to help. In terms of how we can stay connected after today, you can go to my website, and that would be schlesingermanagement.com. The key is to know how to spell my last name, schlesingermanagement.com, and you can join my list to get my job alerts. Every time I start a new search, you'll get an email with that information. On my website, there's a page for people in the job market. It has some articles. It has information about a short book that I wrote with tips for people in the job market. I hate to say this, but please don't send me your resume and ask me for comments. I'd love to read it. I like to help people, but I just can't. And the reason is that there are only 24 hours in the day, and I just can't absorb 250 resumes over the next 2 weeks and read them carefully and give constructive criticism as much as I'd like to do that. But do join my list. Do see what I'm looking at. And if you see a job that I'm leading a few weeks from now or a couple of months from now that interests you, then please contact me. I very much look forward to your questions after you hear more from Martha, and we'll turn back to the other questions. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was a wealth of just tactics and action-oriented pieces that we are going to dig into. I do want to recenter on what particularly employers are thinking and how they're viewing federal employees and experience that are new to the market. And then from there, I'd love to dig into so many of the gems that you just shared, Larry. But Martha, would love to go back to you. What exactly, when we think of federal employees, are employers saying and thinking about their experience that would be useful for folks joining us to know as they go through a job search in the current market?
So I honestly think that a lot of organizations are lumping federal workers into a category, and they're not looking at you as a person. So I think it's really important. Everything that Larry said is spot on. I would agree with everything he said. I think that what you need to do as you are updating your resume, as you are updating your LinkedIn profile, which, believe it or not, LinkedIn is like the Bible for organizations. I think it's super important to go there and make sure that you are putting your best foot forward. You are marketing yourself now. So you have to, in addition to taking out, the acronyms and all the things that people might not know what they are, you need to talk about what you've done that can translate to an organization, any organization. So if you're a project manager, what are some of the projects that you worked on? How did that impact the business? How did that impact? And you can talk about it like the business. You don't have to talk about it like the government, but you're impacting people's lives. That's important. So I think it's super important to just lead with that and not worry about what people are thinking about. Oh, I'm a government worker. And I mean, there's so many, I think, unfortunately, there's so many stereotypes around that. But so I think that you just need to think of yourself as a professional in whatever area you're a professional in. And you just happen to work for the government in that capacity, which is, as you mentioned in the beginning, Katie, is amazing. And people will see that. And I think people want to hire people because they that were in the government. And you have that, again, to what Larry said, you have that advantage. Because it's not a stigma anymore. When I first got let go from an organization, I didn't want to say that I got let go. I had 2 involuntary career transitions because I got let go for whatever reason. One, the job was eliminated, or they didn't think I was the right person for the job. And that's hard for your ego. It's hard for, for you to think about, oh, well, who's gonna want to hire me? But that's where you go back to what you did and really think about. I think it's a really great opportunity right now to reflect on all the things that you accomplished, because you don't do that when you're in the thick of it. And to kind of pile on a little bit with Larry's and the networking, someone told me about 20 years at the beginning of my career that I should always make sure that I keep my network warm and always keep my relationships strong. And I didn't, because I was a mom. I was working. I was putting all of my energies into either the organization or raising my children. And I didn't think about that. And then 2 years ago, when I did another career transition, I'm like, okay, my kids are almost grown, and now I can put some more energy into my career and my networking. So it is so important to do that. And it's not too late. I reached out to people, and people I hadn't spoken to in 10, 15 years got on the phone with me. They're like, oh my gosh, how are you? It's so great to hear from you. Because I think a lot of people were in that same situation. So I think networking is super key. And then the other thing that I would say about whether you're a government employee or whether you're in industry or wherever you are, is this is an opportunity for you to sit back and reflect on what you want to be doing. So you're not only thinking about what you've done, but what you want to do. So in addition to making a list of 15 people that you want to network with, make a list of 15 things that you really enjoyed doing in your job. Or maybe there were 10 things that you really enjoyed doing and that brought you joy and brought you happiness and that you think you're really good at. Because I think that will help you to boost your resume and will help you put your best foot forward on LinkedIn, because that's what you want to be projecting, is the things that you enjoy doing and that you feel that you're good at, because that will show through when you meet with your network, people in your network, when you meet, when you do interviews. You have to, be passionate about it and be confident in what those skills are.
Amazing. So Martha, at the top, you mentioned that LinkedIn was really important. I do want to spotlight for everyone in attendance that in the chat, we actually had one of these explainer series on that very topic with folks from LinkedIn. So please access that recording just to really highlight what Martha shared. What I'm hearing from both of you is the importance of being able to clearly convey your transferable skills. So getting away from that federal specific, perhaps jargon or language, and really clearly saying, these are my accomplishments, these are my capabilities, these are my skills. Whether it is on a resume and a networking conversation, on your LinkedIn, and any career development touch point, how do they leverage their transferable skills? What would you say to someone pivoting out of the federal sector into a non-federal sector and transferable skills, and understanding what transferable skills their intended industry that they seek to enter is looking for?
I could answer that, but Larry, do you want to answer that? I'm happy.
Why don't you start, Martha, please?
Sure. So again, I think it goes back to accomplishments, and it goes back to if you helped to redo an IT software for the government, that's transferable to an organization that's going through that. So if you have experience with, and maybe it's government proprietary, but you can look at that and see what is that IT software, or what is the software that I worked on? And then you just have to say, I managed this project. I got this, rolled out to, I don't know, 100,000 government employees. You talk in metrics and specifics. So, and I'll say that I'll probably that will probably be the answer to many questions, is that you have to be specific and you have to talk about your accomplishments and what you've accomplished, because then also think about what your competencies and your skills are. I think we forget that, some people, when I'm interviewing people, I'm like, so what's your superpower? That's my favorite question to ask. What's your superpower? And then they're like, oh, well, I connect people, or I'm really good at organizing things, or whatever it is. Think about what your superpower is. The other question I always ask, and this I think is good to think about when you're thinking about your transferable skills, what are the things that really bother you in the workplace? Or what are the things that annoy you, right? So what are the things that you prefer not to do, that you might do them, but you prefer not to do them? And then think about how you've gotten past that, and add that as a skill, because that's a skill, because we all do things that we don't like to do. But we have to do them, and we get through them, and we figure them out. So I do think it's about accomplishments and about being specific about what you've accomplished and the metric.
Super interesting framing on a challenge or something you didn't like doing and the skill that allowed you to do that. Thank you. Larry.
Yeah. The tasks that people do in a job in the federal government are not way different from the tasks that a person does in a private sector organization or in a nonprofit or in a state government agency. So it might be that you were a project manager for something, and again, talk about what you accomplished. Maybe you conceived and launched a new service that the entity was providing. Maybe you created a partnership with another organization that led to some important result. So it should not be a challenge to think about the things that you've been doing that would be relevant somewhere else. When people think about federal workers, there's going to be a subset of the population in the private sector who sort of take a stereotypical view thinking, oh, well, you don't know how to work hard, or you don't have a lot of, you don't have a lot of demands on you. That's just not going to, that's not going to be common. And if it happens, don't worry about it. You would not want to work there anyway if they think that way. But if your networking focuses on people who are working in the private sector, who perhaps previously worked in the federal government, they will understand much better and appreciate what you've done. And that's a very large group. And then there are others who maybe have never worked in the government, but always admire and understand how hard it is to work in the government and the limited resources that you're dealing with. And so, you want to, again, in your networking and as you target, focus on areas and people who will appreciate what you're doing. And that's going to be a very large group of people.
Thank you both. So you both have touched on how important networking is. Larry, I really appreciated your anecdote about how it wasn't until that third touch point and reminder to that person that you were looking that they were able to help you. And Martha, it sounds like that you reconnected with folks after many years and they were more than willing to get on the phone with you. That aligns with my experience as well, that people really want to help, but you have to ask for the help or let them know that you're looking or what you need. So can we dig in a little deeper, especially for folks who, again, are pivoting from that federal sector into perhaps new industries or state and local government? How do you ask for help and effectively network, especially if it's an industry you have not previously worked in before?
I send an email to my friend Katy and say, Katy, as you may have heard, several thousand people at the Department of Agriculture were just fired, and I'm one of them. And so I'm now looking for my next opportunity, and I'd love to get your help. Attached is my resume. Let me know if you have 15 minutes for a Zoom call, or if we can get together for a cup of coffee. I'd love to pick your brain and get your thoughts. Looking forward to hearing from you.
That's exactly right. And you just cut and paste that, change the name, but that's what you do. And the other thing I think is important, and we've talked about this a little bit, and I've said it a couple times, you need to sit back and reflect on what you want. You need spend some time on your resume, but don't wait till your resume's perfect, right? Until you reach out and start networking. And it's a 15-minute conversation. And I would almost guarantee 100% that these people that you have in your life that you would be reaching out to because you know that they will give you good advice or that you've had a connection with them, they have 15 minutes in their day and they're very willing, especially if it's over Zoom or whatever it is, because it's so easy. They can sit at their desks and do it or meet you for coffee. But I do think that it's so important to do that. And don't be afraid. Don't be like, oh, well, I haven't spoken to that person, or I only met them once at a soccer game, or whatever it is. Just reach out, because the worst thing that could happen is they ignore you or they say no. And that you don't lose anything with that, right? Because they could say yes. And then they might be, to Larry's point, that might be your next job. Most of my jobs, as I've done my career transitioning, I have found out about, or I have gotten hired because I knew somebody. And it wasn't always a best friend or it was somebody that I'd worked with and that they knew the value that I brought. They had trust in me. And so I reach out to everybody that you know, or maybe 15, like Larry said, make a list of 15. But if you've exhausted that list of 15, then make it list another 15.
Yeah, well, let me build on that concept of 15. 15 is just a starting point, because then when you contact them all and 5 of them ignore you or say they're too busy, but you talk to 10, the last question to each of the 10 is, can you suggest 1 or 2 people who you know, who you think I should talk to? So that 15 becomes 10 and that 10 becomes 20 or 30. You write to them, a third of them ignore you, 2/3 agree to meet with you, and you get more names. Before long, you're not going to have time to follow up with every name you get. And that's when you know your networking is really becoming effective. And as I said earlier, you've got the time. If you are not fully employed right now, you've got the time to do this. You actually do have a new job. Your job is to find a job, and you've got the hours to do it.
Yes. You approach it as that, as Larry mentioned, it's a job. You approach it as a job. If you're a project manager, create a spreadsheet. I'm all about Excel spreadsheets. I have a whiteboard When I've gone through my career transitioning, I love to see things up. I'm very visual. I get out my markers. I do my mind mapping. I'm like, what are all the organizations? What are my skills? So you start to plan to get ready for that.
Thank you. So we have a couple of entry-level folks who are wondering, are there any different rules or recommendations you would give for networking, especially when you feel like maybe your network isn't really built yet?
I think that you may not think you have a network, but if you know people, you have a network. If you've worked in an organization, if you've ever had a boss, if you've ever had a coworker, you have a network. So network maybe seems like a little daunting of a term if you haven't been in the workforce for very long, but if you trust me, you have a network. If you sit back and you sat down for 5 minutes and just kind of even closed your eyes and said, okay, who did I work with at that? Who was my boss? You can start making a list. You might not have 15 on your list, but you would get pretty close.
Yep. And that network, it could be people you've worked with recently. If you are early in your career, which suggests you might be young, it's your parents and your friends' parents from high school and college, and it's your friends from college. It's people down the street. If you are on a soccer team that plays every Sunday on the Smithsonian Mall, it's the people on that team.
Yep.
It's a variety of people who you know from various relationships. Nobody who you talk to knows about every opening that's out there, but everybody knows about one opening. And so you want to stitch together this group of people, and that's where you'll hear about a lot of opportunities.
I love that. I worked with students in a previous career, and I always used to remind them not to overlook the power of their peers, that folks their age who are also a couple years into their career, or even in the first year, will know someone who's hiring or about an organization that may interest you. So definitely network with your peers as well. We are about halfway through the webinar. I want to remind folks that we will be recording and this will be available on our website as well. So if you were unable to stay for the full duration, no worries. I want to continue down these questions that are more tactical. Larry, earlier you mentioned resumes. We all know that the federal resume is much longer, more detailed, has a very specific format. It is often the guidance that if you are seeking a non-federal role, to keep it to 1 to 2 pages. So we'd love to hear, as people are making that pivot from federal to a non-federal sector, what are recruiters and employers expecting in the resume, and what changes should our job seekers make?
I'll start on that. So as I said before, I think 2 or 3 pages. It probably shouldn't go beyond 3 pages. A resume does not, unlike perhaps a federal job resume, a resume in the private sector does not have to be an affidavit of everything you've ever done since you were in high school. So focus on the last 5, 8, 10 years. If you are 55 years old, what you did when you were 25, 27, 28 is probably highly irrelevant and distracting from what you've done recently, and most importantly, what you want to do next. So focus on the jobs, the last 2 or 3 jobs you've had, hopefully that cover a 5, 10, 12-year period. And for each one, list 3 or 4 bullet items of what you've accomplished. Don't have 12 bullet items of job responsibilities. That becomes overwhelming, it's numbing, it's hard to absorb. And so talk about these recent jobs, include a section on education, the degrees you have, any honors, anything that would be relevant, and then other skills, interests. If you speak a foreign language, mention that. Certain computer programming that might be important in vogue now. Don't say Microsoft Office. That's not something that is distinctive. What I don't know too much about, maybe Martha does, is how AI and scanning of resumes is now affecting the job search. Because when I do a search, the resume comes to me by email, and it's actually read by a human being with 2 eyes. That's me. I don't run it through a machine looking for keywords. But I know from my children, I'm sort of a dinosaur in that, and that knowing the keywords is very important so that the resume gets accepted. So maybe Martha might have more insight.
Yeah. So in the work that I do now, I look at resumes. We don't run it through a scanner. We don't have an applicant tracking system on our end. We use something called Ezekiel, where we keep all of our resumes and our candidates and all of that. But I do, and when I was inside organizations and doing recruiting, we also didn't have a sophisticated AI generated system that kind of pulled resumes and spit them in one side or the other. I I don't know. My guess is places like Booz Allen and some of the bigger, larger organizations may have that, but I still think there's a lot of people that are looking at your resumes. So I can't speak to that specifically. I'm not in those larger organizations, but what I would say is I agree with everything. Again, Larry and I are very in sync. Everything that he said about the resume. What I would say, when you're choosing the 3 or 4 bullets to put underneath the job that you've done, make sure that you're talking about what you did and how it impacted the organization. Too many times I see resumes, even with people that have been, they're very far along in their career. They may have changed jobs a couple times. They think their resume is looking good, and their resume looks like a job description. Or to Larry's point earlier, it looks like something that probably the person before them did, and they just kept it going. So if you've had some major impact on something within your role, that's what I would identify and put in those bullets. Having a 2 to 3 page resume is fine. I think it's better to stick to 2 if you can, just because it really is, if I'm getting 50 resumes, as I used to do when I was inside an organization, now I do more sourcing, but if I'm getting 50 resumes and I'm starting to look, and if it's getting too long, I'm like, oh gosh, they can't say what they need to say in two pages. Let's move on to the next one. So I'll have a I'll do the swipe thing, this pile, that pile. I might go back to that, but I definitely will say, okay, this one's a little long and they're not really saying anything interesting. Nothing is bubbling up. And the other thing I would say with resumes, make sure you proofread it. I know you've probably been told that. I cannot tell you how many times I've looked at a resume and in the first half of the first page, there's a typo and I'm like, oh, no attention to detail, right? So it's not a total showstopper, but if you want to stand out and you want to show people, because all you have are these 2 pieces of paper, they haven't met you, they haven't seen you, they don't know anything about you, and they're trying to make a judgment about whether or not you're going to be good for the role. You've got 2 pages or 3 pages to do it. Think about it that way. How are you going to put your best foot forward in that document? And then the other thing, I'm gonna just go on with cover letters, because I know that's one of the questions, Katie, and I'm sure Larry, you have some advice on this as well. It is so important to have a cover letter that will make you stand out, and it needs to be specific to the organization. I think you can have an outline of what your cover letter is going to look like, because there's 3 or 4 skills you really want to highlight. Don't have a 2-page cover letter. Don't have a full-page cover letter. You can do it in 3 paragraphs. It's my personal opinion. Larry, you can have a different one. You can do it in 3 paragraphs, and you need to highlight why you want to work for that organization and what is it about that organization, why you think you're going to add value to that organization. Because the other thing that happens, if I get a cover letter that I can tell has been regurgitated, they just cut and pasted. Sometimes people don't even change the name of the organization. They forget to do that because they're just trying to get as many out as they can. That is a complete no for me. So that's how another way that you can put your foot forward. And I have to say, I have called people and hired people based on their cover letter, because it was so compelling that I wanted to call them. I wanted to talk to them. I was interested in meeting them. So I think a cover letter is super key to align with your resume.
Martha, I love that. Thank you so much for pivoting to cover letters. A note I want to make is your resume is precious real estate. I love what you said, that you really do need to convey what you offer, what skills and experience in 2 pages or less. And if you're struggling to do that, ask yourself, does this really need to go on the resume for this particular role? So I really appreciated that. And if there's anything that you're missing or you feel like that you don't get to go into deeply enough, that's where that cover letter can also be really valuable. That's where you can really tell the story, bring to life your skills and experience, and as Martha shared, hopefully compel someone to pick up the phone and talk to you as soon as possible because you seem to be such a good fit. Larry, is there anything else you'd like to share on cover letters? I appreciate so much what Martha has already shared with the group.
Yeah, I love cover letters. So I'd say write a cover letter if the application instructions ask for a cover letter. If it doesn't, if it just wants a resume, then just send the resume. So the first thing is make sure you follow the instructions. In my searches, I asked for cover letters, and I ask that the cover letter answer two questions. Why does this job interest you? And why do you think you'd be good at it? And so, as Martha said, the letter has to be tailored to the job announcement that you've read that you're responding to. And like Martha, if I see that this person is obviously applying to 15 jobs today and they just cut out the name of American Red Cross and substituted the name of my client, they're dead in the water. I want to know that they really want to work where my client is and that they make the case. And I want to think, wow, I really like to meet this person. Sometimes I read the cover letter first, sometimes I read the resume first. I'm not always consistent on that. But if there's an opportunity to write a cover letter, tailor it. The resume, I know a lot of people spend a lot of time fiddling with a resume every time they apply for a new job. They take something out, put something in. That becomes very confusing. You took something out that was important, you forget what it is. You can't have 8 versions of a resume. It becomes unmanageable. So I think a good resume is a document that is going to be the same document for almost everything you're applying, and it's the cover letter that gets tailored.
100%. Agree 100%, Larry. Yep.
Absolutely. So we've dug in a lot to networking, resumes, cover letters. We addressed that some folks on the call are early career. Shifting gears to folks that might be with us who are nearing retirement age, what do they need to be mindful of in any of these aspects throughout the career pivot, especially being mindful of the potential for age discrimination?
So there is sometimes age discrimination, and what you cannot control your age. You are what you are. And if I've done several searches where, to my client's surprise, the person who they picked, who they wanted, who they hired, was older than the imaginary profile they had at the beginning of the search. So if you are of a certain age, you have a lot of skills and experience and maturity and judgment and seasoning to offer that somebody who is 25 years younger can't match. And so that's what you want to convey. And if there's some place that says, you know, we really want somebody who's under 40 for this job, well, that's not the place for you.
Right.
But there are a lot of places where they say, we want somebody that we don't have to teach them how to work. We don't have to give them a lot of skills. They know what to do. They have the maturity we want. My wife applied for a job a few years ago and came home from the first interview, and she said, they're never going to hire me. The guy who interviewed me is younger than our daughter. I'm older than his mother. It's not going to happen. Well, you know the end of the story. 2 interviews later, she was hired, and they worked together beautifully for 3 years. Neither's in the job right now, and they're still friends, and our families are friends. It worked out, but it wasn't what she predicted.
Yeah, I agree. I think again, you go back to what you've accomplished, what you were able to do, what your skills are, and you focus on that. You don't focus on your age or all of that. You focus on your experience, your maturity, your ability to work in groups and teams, your ability to get work done. Those are the things that you focus on. All the things that you would focus on if you were, at the beginning of your career. You focus at the end of your career. You just have a lot more to share because you've accomplished a lot more because you've done more.
So the main message is don't worry about it.
Right.
That's just going to slow you down.
Yep.
Appreciate that question and appreciate your responses. Shifting gears just slightly, Martha, this question is for you. It may be a new concept to work with a search firm. So who might be good to work with a search firm, and how might someone think about that option and pursue it?
So what I do and what Larry mentioned he does, we work with companies. So for instance, I did a search for the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. I helped them find a controller. So they came to us, to my organization, Stanton Chase, and said, we need a new controller. Can you help us find that person? So what I do is I go out to LinkedIn, I go out to my network, and I look for candidates that fit the recruitment profile. So if you get tapped on LinkedIn, if somebody calls you and says, your resume looks like it would fit this role, or do you know somebody that would fit this role? I would say, call them back, email them back. That's how I found my role. I was at WCNY, and actually it was Stanton Chase that reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, we've got this great role. Are you interested, or do you have 15 minutes to talk about it? I picked up the phone, and 2 months later, I was working at WCNY, which is our local PBS station up here in Syracuse. So I think that be open to that. Be open to having conversations. People reach out to me all the time and say, "Oh, I see you do executive search. You have time to talk." And I don't have time to talk to everybody, but what I tell them is, yes, I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to put your resume into my system because it looks like you have skills. We're not looking for that role right now, but we might be. You never know. So I would say if people reach out to you, or if you know people that are in executive search, that's how I would interact with them. I don't know, Larry, you may work with it differently, but again, I don't have time to look at everybody's resume or talk to everybody, but I'm happy to, if there's a specific job that you see and you see, oh, Stanton Chase is looking for this role, I think I would be a good fit for that.
Yeah. So I don't keep a database of resumes. I just decided to make a match depends so much on timing and coincidence that it's not a good use of my time. So when people send me a resume, I'll read it when I have time to do it. I'll give comments if I can. As I said earlier, I can't do it as much as I'd like to. So when I start a search, I send it to everybody on my list. And that's why I suggested join my list. And so if 3 months from now, I launch a new search, you'll get the email the second it is public. And if you think it has your name written all over it, contact me. When people say, well, here's my resume and keep me in mind if you hear of anything, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to do that. I'm not going to remember somebody who wrote to me 45 days ago when I hear about something now. So I'm not able to do that. But I can't keep track with what you're doing, but you can easily keep track with what I'm doing. I'm a one-person small search firm. You can track what other search firms are doing. As Martha and I have said, most retained search firms, the kind we are working for the employer. If a search consultant contacts you, they find you randomly through LinkedIn, answer their call, answer their email, respond. Even if you are sure you don't want the job, you just started a new job, you're not movable, create the relationship, because 2 months later, they might have something else, or a year later that you are interested in. And so just be they're willing to spend some time contacting you, take advantage of that, get back to them, get to know them, even if you're not interested in what they have at the moment.
The other thing I would add, Katie and Larry, I'm sure there's organizations like Robert Half that really focuses on accounting. There are organizations out there that are building their resume database. So when sometimes it's a part-time, when I was at Spirit of America, we needed a part-time payroll person. So I went to an organization. I said, I need a part-time, maybe eventually they'll be full-time, but do you have somebody part-time that can come work with me? They have a database of accountants that are kind of looking for roles. And so, or payroll people, so they sent somebody. So there are organizations out there that do that. That's not what Larry and I do, but there are organizations that will be happy to have your resume. They'll interview you and they'll want you in their database Sometimes they're the temporary organizations, but a lot of those temporary organizations end up, you end up in a full-time role because it's like they try you out, like and then they decide they want to hire you. So that's another thing for some of you that have like more specialized skills. And maybe you're not looking for a manager or I don't know, executive role, and you're looking for an accountant role or a project manager role, something like that. There are organizations out there that are that place people like that. They're more placement firms and not executive search firms.
Yeah, and I think the point, the implication of all this is that search firms are not monolithic. There are
Right.
many different kinds. We work different ways. So what you experience with one organization might be very different from another.
Thank you both. So recognizing that we are almost at time, we wanted to get your input for sessions going forward. We have already received a lot of great ideas for future sessions. Thank you. But we wanted to take the time to ask you all to answer 3 quick poll questions. The first is about how effective you feel this webinar has been. The second is about how much you agree that you will take the information from this webinar and apply it moving forward. And the third is asking for your input on future webinar topics. My colleague Haley is going to initiate the poll shortly. Your responses are totally anonymous and will be used to inform future sessions. As always, we really appreciate your attendance tonight as well as your input. So with that, Larry and Martha, I'm going to ask the last question. So the job market now can feel a little hopeless, a little daunting. Folks are feeling scared. So how can people keep perspective during a job search and make sure that their values are front and center?
I look at it as an opportunity. Reflect on what you've done, reflect on what you want, stay focused, make a plan, and take a deep breath. And when you feel overwhelmed, take a deep breath. If you don't exercise or do yoga, I do yoga. So I was doing yoga every day between career transitions. If you don't do yoga, go outside. It's springtime. Go outside and take a walk. If you don't want to take a walk, just do something for yourself, even if it's just sitting and breathing. But do something and don't get discouraged. Or when you think you're discouraged, just take a deep breath, look at your plan. I'm a poster child for career transitioning 7 times, and I'm still here and talking about it and smiling, and you will get through this. It doesn't feel like it now, but you will get through this.
Yeah, you will find something. It might not be in 3 days or 2 weeks. It can take a long time, but you will find something. And what you find might not be great. You might find, oh, this is not the best job of my career. I've had jobs in my career that I thought were going to be great, and I learned once I got there, no, this is not where I want to be, and I left to my chagrin. And so so your next job is not going to necessarily be your last job, your final job. While you're looking, we talked about networking, enjoy the opportunity. You're not going to just get to know a lot of people. And many of the leads are going to lead to nothing, or maybe you get an interview and you don't get called back, but you've met more people. And as Martha said, keep the network warm. So this is a great byproduct of the job search, is that you will have a larger, more up-to-date network as part of your life. And you'll be doing this until you get the offer you want to accept. And if you can, don't feel that you have to accept the first offer you get. You might feel that pressure. Financial constraints are important. So money's important, and what kind of savings you have if you are completely out of work right now. So those are important, but you want to make a thoughtful decision. They need you as much as you need them. You have leverage when you negotiate. We haven't talked about salary. I no longer ask people for their salary history. I don't ask them what they made. I don't ask them what they want to make. I think those are bad questions. I ask my clients to say in the job announcement, what's the anticipated salary range? And that is becoming much more common practice. So hopefully when you apply for jobs, you'll know what the range is, and you'll spend your time focusing on things where the salary matches what you can afford to take. but you might want to try to stretch them a little bit or enhance some of the benefits. When you get an offer, that is your most powerful time to negotiate better terms of an offer. It's not after you accepted. It's not 2 years into the job. It's when you get an offer and haven't yet accepted it. So keep that in mind.
Wonderful closing remarks, both of you. Larry, Martha, thank you for being here this evening. We really appreciate your time. We know that you are super busy and we appreciate you sharing your expertise and perspective with us. It is so valuable. To those of you that attended, please keep the questions and topics coming and we'll try to get to them in upcoming discussions and our Explainer Series webinars. Please don't forget to keep checking our resource hub for federal employees in the meantime. We have more FAQs, blogs, links, and other resources coming very soon. Friendly reminder, ourpublicservice.org. For all the federal employees out there, thank you once again for all of the critical work that you do day in and day out to serve our country. I believe it was Martha who said, you know, think about what is your superpower. Being a civil servant is one of your superpowers. And we know that at the partnership, and I just want to extend our most sincere gratitude for all that you've done and will continue to do. We wish you all the best. We look forward to seeing you in the future and have a wonderful day or evening wherever you're joining from. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.